Hello. Hi guys, this video today is going to be talking about much more of a happy topic than the last video I was talking about. It's going to be a video on good memories that I have. So I'm planning to make separate videos on funny memories and separate videos on a negative memory that I have, but this particular one is on happy memories. Just an assortment of happy memories that I've written down as I've started to go over them again recently. So the memory that really triggered this was I was lying in bed and my girlfriend was walking around outside of the bedroom doing things, turning lights on, that kind of thing. And ordinarily, I guess you would expect that to be irritating, but for me, I have always enjoyed the sensation of other people moving around while you're in bed and trying to get to sleep. I think that stems from, as a child, going to sleep or trying to get to sleep and your parents still doing things downstairs and feeling safe as a result. So I have something of a positive memory of that, and particularly at my grandma's house actually. My grandma, her house is quite compact, I guess you could say, and I remember being on the top bunk of the bunk beds in one of her guest bedrooms, and there's this top little window that leads out onto the landing, and the adults would be going up and down the stairs pretty much the entire time, going up the stairs, going to the bathroom, doing all kinds of stuff upstairs, and the light would just continually be flicking on and on, which really sounds incredibly irritating, but in my case, it just made me feel comfortable and safe and kind of protected. And that's the memory that really triggered me on the path of talking about some of these memories on video. Since I've just mentioned my girlfriend and the word irritating in the same sentence, I feel like I should add a positive memory including her. A couple will include her in this video, but this is one that particularly sticks in my memory. A lot of these memories will be centered around certain video games, because if you've ever played video games in a, I guess, deeper sense, you understand that video games of a certain type can really infect your memory and become part of a certain time in your life, where playing those games might pull you back to that moment immediately and deliver you some pretty nice nostalgia. So this game in particular is Terraria, and I remember playing an absolute bunch of Terraria whilst at my girlfriend's house, or my girlfriend's childhood home, and just being really nicely looked after by my girlfriend, by her mum, and being surrounded by little dogs, which you can see in one of my other videos, the doghouse video. And that just being a really positive experience, feeling really cozy, feeling really supported, and feeling just in a really positive position whilst playing this game. So I used to sit on the sofa, normally covered in dogs, try and see what I was doing whilst I play this game, whilst there'd also be a film on or something, and just chatting to people. It's the kind of game you can tune out of a little bit. So that was a really positive memory for me. Now this other memory is one that I've been using to justify my feelings around certain things recently. I have perhaps negatively intense desire to better myself and to improve constantly over the course of my life. I mean, it is very helpful, but I don't think it's always good to become a slave to your need to improve. One way in which I think I can get away from that feeling is to think about when I was on my gap year, or when I was an older teenager, and I might have been unemployed, or I might have just had nothing to do, or it might have been the summer, various reasons why I might not have been doing anything in particular. And I would just get up at maybe 10 AM, summer, winter, whatever, wander down the stairs, play with a cat if the cat was there at the time, make myself breakfast, make myself food, and just take the day at a really leisurely pace. I might go out for a walk in the countryside, I might play video games all day. It was just a really, really pleasant and relaxing time in my life, and I like to think back on that as a time when I wasn't necessarily that focused on improving myself, but I was still felt really at peace at that point. Now that I'm sort of an older person, it's a lot trickier for me to engage with that on a longer period. If I have more than a couple of months where I'm not doing something, it really gets to me. So it's really nice to think back and remember that as a point when I could do that and the value of doing that. Another childhood memory here, this one is, I find that often in the ether of memory, you can pick out a certain time, but you don't know how old you were. There's just very specific memories of it. And this one is a very specific memory of my dad and me and my brother walking in a frozen field close to Christmas on a day when it was completely cloudless in England. Now, if you've ever experienced this, you'll know that English people have a specific word for this called a crisp day, which means that the air is so kind of sharp and cold and fresh feeling that you can almost taste it. And it's a really relatable feeling, I think, for people that grew up around the countryside. And my dad, actually my mum as well, but particularly my dad, had a drive when I was younger to push me and my brother into not necessarily spending lots of time indoors, but spending as much time outdoors walking around as possible. So I feel like that really bettered my appreciation for living somewhere rural. Maybe undercut some of the boredom that you can feel living in a rural area as a teenager and that kind of thing. But I can still taste the air from this moment and really think back to this time and feel like I'm there walking with my dad and my brother. And yeah, it always makes me feel good when I think about it. I miss cold weather while I'm in Hong Kong, even though the hot weather is really enjoyable. Another memory from that particular moment is I remember I got a lecture on, I think maybe even I just improved my posture there just thinking about it. But my dad gave me a extended lecture on the importance of posture, because when he was younger his posture was terrible, and as a result he spent years trying to improve it and get it better. So I have that constantly in my head now, this lecture where he impressed upon me the importance of posture. So now I try to do that as much as possible. Also because it's just good for your body as well to have better posture. It's not necessarily a superiority thing, but this is not just for me, this is for everybody. Everyone should have good posture if it's possible for you. Another walking memory is my next one, and that's this time walking with my mum when I must have been about 6 or 7. I was kind of a slightly odd child and I didn't have a lot of friends. I was maybe a bit precocious for my age and didn't really understand the way that a lot of social systems worked at that point. So I was maybe not aggressively bullied, but I was certainly ostracized from most groups at that point in my life, and that continued up until maybe I was 12 or 13. I have a very vivid memory of always feeling better about it when I walked to school with my mum, because I would walk to school. We live very close to my local school, and like I said, in the rural area, and we'd just walk down this really pretty main street in the village that we live in, and we would talk about a different topic every day. We'd try and come up with something unique and interesting to talk about, and it must have been very entertaining for my mum having a little 7-year-old ginger kid bobbing along next to her saying, "Oh, what should we talk about today? Let's talk about something different." For me, that's a really positive memory in a time in my life where I was very confused by a lot of things and didn't really understand how things worked. And it was nice to have that structure and that kind of positive repetitiveness in my life. Also, I think that might have been the start of my leaning towards enjoying certain parts of education, and particularly enjoying educating myself through other people. I've got a really fierce desire to educate myself by just talking to as many people as I can, and that I think might have been the start of that for me. Okay, this next one is going to sound super, I was going to use the term ghetto, but it's going to sound super weird, and on first glance you might think, oh, okay. Honestly, thinking about it, it's one of my most memorable and positive things I used to do with my brother when I was younger. I haven't mentioned my brother much previously in this video, but he really is pretty much one of the most important people in my life. This memory is one of the things I like to throw back to, just to remind myself that despite arguing a lot when we were younger, we really looked after each other, and it was really important to have him when I was younger. And this memory involves my dad's very, very long garden when I was younger. He had a garden that was not very wide, maybe 10 meters wide, but a good at least 100, 200 meters long. It was huge, like a allotment garden almost, that backed onto this field. And the field, I loved it. I used to stare into it for hours and like make up stories with my brother about all kinds of stuff that might be happening in the field and that kind of thing. One thing my dad used to do, probably when he wanted me and my brother out of the way, but also to flare our imagination, he had these, I think it must have been 4 or 5, about this big, I want to say oil drums, but they're not. They're the kind of things you'd use to transport large amounts of liquids, so large, like gallon jugs of milk, but a lot bigger. And they were wide enough and flat enough for us to stand, sit, or kneel on them. Everyone knows the game where you pretend the floor is lava. We would basically do that, but with the grass in the garden, and pass these oil drums from one end of the little line we formed to the other, and make our way entirely from one end of the garden to the other. It would take us hours and hours and hours, but it was because of the imagination we had and the way we made up these games, it ended up turning into a really enjoyable way to spend an entire afternoon and get out of my dad's hair. Yeah, again, a really nice memory to think back on. And actually, kind of a slightly sad memory attached to it is I remember me and my brother, when I must have been about maybe 13, going back to my dad's house when we were about to leave that house and move to a new one, and trying to recreate that kind of experience of making up games entirely with your imagination, with almost nothing to work with, and remembering it just did not feel as vivid as it did before, and almost feeling like I'd lost some kind of magical power as a result, and it was a little bit crushing. But I think you find new ways to use your imagination as you get older. Speaking of getting older, this is one of my most positive memories from when I was an adult, or young adult. Still one of my best friends, a guy called Reese. Me and him used to spend a heck of a lot of time around the village that I live in, just exploring, often with a crate of beer. We'd just go to a field and chat together, listen to music, just explore the local area to the point of exhaustion, where we'd just pick a direction and say, okay, let's walk in this direction for a couple of hours. The area I live in is surrounded entirely by farmland, fields, basically provided this almost a kind of follow-on from the weird imagination games I used to play as a child. It's like a mix of my experiences talking to my mum when I was younger and my experiences just exploring with my brother. We kind of did both and would often invite our friends out to the places that we found to have little kind of outdoor parties and that kind of thing. That's a super positive memory from a time in my life where really things weren't going very well for me and I didn't really feel very good about anything, and that really provided something to be happy about at that point. Further memories with Reese are visiting my ex-girlfriend, now girlfriend at the time, in London. We used to go to music gigs, punk music gigs, pretty much like sometimes twice a week, or I think at least at some points, where we'd go down to London, see the gig, go stay at my girlfriend's house, and then go back in the morning. Or Reese worked in London sometimes, so he would then go and do some work in London. And I have really positive memories of the area of London called Camberwell. I don't think it's a particularly well-developed area, but it's an area that certainly feels very raw and has a lot of weird stuff going on. All kinds of weird things happened there while we were there. And I remember just walking through there, this very familiar pattern, seeing all the street foxes, getting this food from probably a horribly unhealthy fast food shop, buying like some grape soda or something, and going to eat all of that food at my ex-girlfriend's house. And she was in, I think, student halls at the time, so it was completely not allowed. But Reese would, I think, sleep on the sofa, and I had this open area sofa where there'd be students walking in all the time, and I'd stay obviously in my girlfriend's room. Quick flashback to childhood again here. This must have been when I was about 10, something like that. I'm terrible with ages, so I could have been 14, I don't know. But it was Christmas that I spent with my grandma and my mum's side of the family, and I have really positive memories of it for the reason that, this sounds very materialistic, but I was 10. I got exactly what I wanted for Christmas, exactly what I wanted. Those things were, from my grandma, I got a game called Age of Mythology. Like Age of Empires, but it's got all kinds of mythical creatures in it. I was fascinated by mythology and still am when I was a child, and I've always felt a weird affinity to these strange stories and thought they were a lot more appealing to me than most contemporary religion. I'm not religious by any real standard, but I find them more compelling, and they teach, in my opinion, more compelling lessons about human beings than modern religions. But that's just for me personally. So that game, I was really super excited to play it, and I remember being absolutely ecstatic about it. I also got an entire, remember I'm 10, an entire box of these kind of fizzy belt sweets that I used to really love. My mum managed to find me an entire industrial size kind of crate of them that I ate in about, over the course of a week. And I remember just the entire inside of my mouth being blue as a result for like maybe a month afterwards. Probably set myself up for some nasty diseases later in life, but and the final thing that I got, which really occupied my time and I really enjoyed and still love these things today. Graphic novels about a character called Asterix, who's very famous in Europe and England, particularly France, who's, again, I think we're picking up on a trend with what I used to enjoy as a child. Kind of a historical comic based on the resistance of Gallic tribes to Roman occupation, which to me as a kid and now is super fascinating. And so I really enjoyed sitting, eating these sweets, just looking forward to playing this game and reading these comics. That's a really positive memory. Obviously, I'm not discounting the importance of spending time with my family, but still at 10, I was very insular and really enjoyed having things just to do with myself. So that's a really positive memory for me. Back to my girlfriend, I have a very positive memory of my first time in Japan. I went with her, and I'm actually going to Japan, sadly solo this time, because she's working. but I'm going to Japan soon on my own, and I'm absolutely ecstatic to relive this experience of the first time going to Japan. I really have enjoyed pretty much every country I've explored in the world. I have really positive memories of going to places like Greece, going to Europe with Reese, interrailing. More stories about that will probably happen on another video. Going to France with 3 of my closer friends. So many positive memories of the countries I visit, but Japan tops it just for the reason that it's the only country that's actually exceeded my expectations for how weird and just interesting and strange. It's such an odd country, and there's so much weird stuff going on. For someone who grew up in rural England, that is just a complete turn on its head. Everything that I expected to enjoy there and have happen there pretty much happened. So I'm really excited to go back and relive that and enjoy that as well. Okay, last one I want to talk about is one that's again very personal, but I had probably the best job I've ever had a couple of years ago, where I worked at a place called Go Ape, which is an assault course that's elevated about 30 feet into the trees in lots of forested areas in the UK. You get up on a harness and you swing around and you jump off things. It's really cool. One of the most positive parts of that was I got to close the course, which meant that after the last customers had left, I got to go up on the course, play around on it pretty much as I wanted, and then check all the safeties and then close the course. So that meant pulling the ladders up, basically unhooking everything that would allow people to get up during the night, then going down the zip line at the end of the day, and that would take me to essentially back to the cabin and the car park where I then go home. At one point I was able to close this course. It was actually around Halloween. It was one of my last days working there, and I was really sad to be leaving, but they basically let me go up when it was very cold, getting dark, almost too dark to see. I had a head torch on, basically took my time as much as I could, probably to the absolute rage of everyone else working there, just wanted to go home. But I was like, right, this is my last time here, I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can. So I spent the entire time going around the course. I think I tested the big swing about 10 times, and I think I was singing the whole time. I think I had Fleetwood Mac in my head that day for some reason, so I was singing that the whole time. Just going home from there feeling completely fulfilled. And it's a shame really that there isn't that much possibility for development in jobs like that much opportunity to really do that kind of thing, because the combination of working with people, customer serving, but also not bending over backwards to support a customer environment, being able to be outdoors and explore outdoors is really everything that I could ever want in a job. So maybe I'll find something like that again one day. Or something working with a camera, that'd be nice too. My current job isn't that bad really either. Okay, so that's most of the positive things that I wanted to talk about today. Feeling all super nice now, so I highly recommend everyone does this. I actually got part of the idea of this from a sports podcast that I was listening to, which recommends a mental highlight reel. It really is something that I think can make you feel really better when you're having a really bad time. You just think about all the positive things that have happened to you, or even just one or two, and you pull those up and you kind of try not to be too nostalgic, but swim in them a little bit and just experience them and realize that there's lots of positives to being alive, as well as just hard work and stuff you have to struggle through. Okay, so that's really all I had to talk about today. Please like and subscribe if you like this. I am planning to release more content soon on one really long story on a bad memory, which might be a bit weird for people who don't know me, but for people who know me, they've probably heard me tell this story 1,000 times and it's super weird. And then a bunch of funny memories, probably some associated with the stories I've told today, and yeah, just generally some more stuff that I've come up with that I'd like to release soon. Oh, and expect pictures from Japan after I come back. I'll edit them into another one of my videos. Thanks everybody. Again, please communicate with me. I really like that when people do that as a result of my videos. Through any means that you want to comment, send me a message if you know me. Okay, thanks for watching everybody.